I want you to think about people who make you comfortable. Do you have people in your life who just make you comfortable? Those are good friends to have. People you feel like you can kick your shoes off, you can sit back with. There's no tension when you're around them. You're not worried about what they're gonna think, or if you have to say the right thing at the right time, or what's gonna happen if you say the wrong thing. They're just easy to be around. Do you have people like that in your life? Just easy to be around. Now think about the opposite, as much as I know you're looking forward to. Think about the opposite. People that are difficult to be around. Maybe for some of us, it's someone at work, and you just dread walking into the room, because who knows on any particular day what's going to set them off. What if you say the wrong thing? What if they're in the wrong mood? There's so much tension around them, so you pretty much try to avoid them because it drains you. Do you have people like that in your life? Here's the question. How do you feel around God? Is he someone who makes you feel safe, or is he someone that you feel tense around? Do you picture him as warm and welcoming, or do you picture him as unpredictable, maybe even dangerous? Because depending on our answer, we'll either come near to him or we may keep him at a distance. So the story we're going to look at today is one of the more shocking stories in the Bible. But it forces us to deal with this question most of us want to avoid. What kind of God are we actually dealing with? And how do we approach him? How do we approach him without getting burned? So we're in 2 Samuel. We've been in the book of 2 Samuel for a while. This is chapter 6, verses 1 through 11. We've been following along with King David's life. You might remember we went through his battle with Goliath, and then the death of his closest friend Jonathan and King Saul. And then we're here in chapter 6, verse 1 through 11. I'll read, you follow along. And this is the story of David continued. It says, then David again gathered all the elite troops in Israel, 30,000 in all. He led them to Bela of Judah to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, were guiding the cart that carried the ark of God. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and all the people of Israel were celebrating before the Lord, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, electric guitars, pianos, drums, tambourines, castanets, cymbals. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand and steadied the ark of God. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him dead because of this. So Uzzah died right there beside the ark of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord, and he asked, how can I ever bring the ark of the Lord back into my care? So David decided not to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. Does God seem far away? Does he seem disinterested, distant, like he doesn't care? The Bible's claim is actually the opposite. It's not that God is far away from us. We're the ones who are easily distracted. We're the ones who are drawn away from God. That's what the Bible claims. We're the ones who forget his name. what he's really like. We don't respond to him the way he deserves. We're the ones who do things that we shouldn't do and hope that God's not looking, right? God, don't be too close to me right now because I'm not living right. How quick are we to put God on trial and judge him for not being what we think he should be? But David wants to fix this problem. Look at verse 2. He led them to Bela of Judah to bring back the ark of God, to bring it back, which bears the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, enthroned between the cherubim. David went to go get the ark. Now, we have to ask this question. Maybe not everybody knows. What is this ark of God, also known as the Ark of the Covenant? Maybe you've heard about it. It comes up in the news from time to time. In fact, most recently, I've heard stories that the CIA has enlisted psychics to try to find the Ark of the Covenant. That's actually a thing. Some people think that it's in Ethiopia. It was in Indiana Jones, the movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You remember that? God commanded Moses to build this gold-plated 2-foot by 4-foot chest, and in it, it held the 10 Commandments, the 2 tablets. It held a jar of manna. If you don't know what that is food when the Israelites were in the desert, a kind of bread. That will make some great sourdough right now, I'm telling you. But it also kept Aaron's staff. Here's what it might have looked like. This is a picture of what it could have looked like. 2-foot by 4-foot chest with the cherubim on top, notice. The ark wasn't just a box, though. The ark represented God's presence. God's not in the box, don't think that, but he's with the box. Wherever the box is, God is with the box. God sits between the cherubim. The ark is a kind of model of what's in heaven, right? It's a physical representation of a spiritual reality. The ark was the exact point where heaven and earth overlapped. Now, the ark was at Abinadab's house in Judah. Remember last week we talked about Judah being in the south, and David had conquered what is now Jerusalem, what was called then Jebus from the Jebusites, and he's called it the Jerusalem, or they renamed it Jerusalem. And so he's taking the ark from the south, Judah, he's going to take it up to Jerusalem. Why does he have to go get it? Because it's been there for 20 years, and that's the problem. See, for 20 years, the ark had been ignored. Now, let me ask you, how do you ignore the very thing that represents God on earth? Why would you do that? It's because worship was not the center of the Israelites' lives, which means God was not at the center of their lives. Why would anyone not make God the center of their life? I can think of 3 reasons. Number 1, they don't really know who God is. Secondly, they really don't care who he is. They might know a little bit about him, but they just don't care. Thirdly, I think some people would just rather be in charge of their own lives. They would rather be their own kind of God. No thanks, God. I'd like to do things my way. And that's why we wouldn't make God the center of our lives. In other words, God, I like you over there. And this is where everything goes wrong. Because we were made to live with God. We were made to live in the presence of God. In fact, a human who's not with God stops being human. The entire universe without God begins to unravel. Why? Because God is the one who sustains the universe. We're told that Jesus sustains the universe. He holds it all together. So we were made to be in the presence of God. But you can't just casually walk into the presence of God. And that's where we come up to this very difficult part in this passage. I don't know if it took you back. It did me when I read it, but it's very difficult. The ark is being pulled on a cart, right? It's about to topple over. Maybe there was some uneven ground or something. It begins to fall. And this man named Uzzah, he reaches out to keep it from falling. And he touches the ark and God strikes him dead on the spot. Why would God do that? That's so cruel. It's mean. This is the kind of stuff that when people read the Bible, they say, I don't get it. I don't like this kind of God. I don't know that I can believe in that. It doesn't sound like a good God. It doesn't sound like a loving, forgiving, gracious, merciful God. Doesn't sound like a good God. That kind of God actually seems kind of scary. He'll just kill you for no reason at all. The littlest thing. You touch the box and you're dead. It's shocking. It should be shocking. But the Bible doesn't ignore that either. Those people aren't ignorant of that. They're not like, oh, well, Uzzah just died today. No, this is shocking. They have the same feelings that we have today reading this. That's why David says, I'm afraid now. I can't have this thing near me. In another sense, it's shocking because we don't understand who God is. Here's the question. Is God the problem? Did God do things the wrong way? You might say, well, I guess I'm supposed to say, no, God never does anything the wrong way, right? He's perfect. But that's not how we feel in our heart. In our heart, we feel like this is wrong. This isn't justice. This isn't right. It's not mercy. This feels wrong. What's going on? David had to learn an important lesson here. Worship and a relationship with God must be on God's terms. Worship must be on God's terms. We don't get to come to God our way. We have to do it His way. Worship begins with God. It doesn't begin with us. Now, human beings are used to being in charge. We like to be in charge. In fact, we rule the earth. Have you noticed there is no other creature on earth as powerful as we are? Sure, we're not the strongest animals, if you want to think of it that way. I remember years ago, I was on a missions trip to Africa, and we were doing a tour through a safari tour, and you see all of these animals, incredible animals everywhere. And I asked the guide, I said, is there any animal out here that I could outrun? He said, no. But yet we are the most powerful creatures by far on earth. Now, if you're used to being in charge, how are we going to react when someone comes around and says, no, we're not doing things your way? How are we going to react to that? You know, for years, Joanna has wanted to make a t-shirt. Maybe you've heard me say this. Joanna's wanted to make a t-shirt that says, be the parent. Because as a teacher, so many times she'd have parents come to her and say, I can't get my kids to do things. I can't get them to obey me and do the right thing. And she'd say, what do you mean? You're bigger than them. What do you mean they won't do what you say? You're bigger. Maybe kids should get t-shirts and say, I own you. That might be more accurate. God is bigger than us. He's the one in charge. So then why? Why did God strike Uzzah down? The law was that the ark had to be carried on the shoulders of the Levites with poles. In fact, if you remember, there are rings on the sides of the ark for poles to go in to be carried by Levites, priests. So God said this many times. He said, only the priests are allowed to carry the ark. Why did no one think to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't put this on a cart? Nobody thought, not David the king, not the priests, not the Levites, nobody came around and said, I don't think putting this on the cart is the right thing. Don't you remember what God said over and over? We're supposed to carry this thing. No one said that. Why? Why did nobody think to say, we should do it differently? It might be because years prior to this, so it's been sitting there for 20 years, but before then, the Israelites had lost a battle to the Philistines. The Philistines came and they stole the ark. It didn't go well for them. So they said, you know what? We don't want any part of this. And they brought it back. Guess how they brought it back? On a cart. And so David and the leaders thought, well, it must be fine. It must be fine to move this thing around on a cart. In fact, we'll make a brand new cart just for it. It'll look so great. But that's not what God said. The question for us is, who's shaping our view of God? Who's telling us what God wants? When we say, this is right for me, this is how I want to live, this is good, this is how I determine between good and bad and right and wrong. When we say, I want to live this way, I should do this, I shouldn't do that, how do you know? How do you know if you're supposed to live that way or think that way? What are we basing our judgment on? Is it just how I feel? Is it just what I think the way things should be? Have we asked, how does God want to be treated? What does God think? How does God want to be worshiped? What does he expect? How do we know? Who are we letting into our minds to shape how we think and how we live? Who are we listening to? Sometimes when people mess up, you'll hear them say, well, God understands. He knows my heart. He understands me. He knows my intentions, right? That's what we mean. And it's true, he does. He knows our hearts. And I get it, but we have to be careful. We have to be really careful. In fact, because are we sure that we're not saying my sin is no big deal, God? You know my heart. It's no big deal. Are we making light of grace? Are we saying to Jesus, Jesus, your pain and suffering on the cross, no big deal because my sin's no big deal. You know my heart. Here was the problem. David and Uzzah and the other priests, they didn't take this thing seriously. It shouldn't be shocking to us that God did what he said he was going to do. We say, God, I just want you to be true. I just want to be able to believe in you and trust in you. And so he says, okay, this is what I say. And then he actually does what he says. What should be shocking is that the people who know God, they lost something. They lost the true image of God's holiness and his purity. They lost the awe and the majesty of standing before him in his presence, the presence of God amongst you, to be that close to God. Something was lost. Something in their culture, in their thinking, made them lose a sense of who God really is. We're told that David, he was afraid. And not just afraid, he was angry. He was angry at God. He was angry for what God did to Uzzah. David's hurt. He's confused. He's afraid. He says, we're doing all of this for you, God. We are worshiping you. This was our worship, our celebration. Why would you just come in and ruin it all like this? Have you ever been angry at God? Have you ever felt like God wasn't fair? He wasn't right? He wasn't good? So what are you going to do? Are you going to shake your fist at God and call him a moral monster? Are you going to punish him by not believing in him? If he isn't there, why are you so mad? Maybe we should do what David did. Take a moment. Take a step back. Rethink some things. See, this is the difference with David. David was a man after God's own heart. David loved God. Why? Because when he messed up, he went to God. David's got all the same raw emotions that we have, and he lets it be known. But he's humble enough to say, maybe I've got things wrong. Maybe I ought to see things differently. He's got this part right. We can't get close to God. There's a problem with getting too close to God. So this is what he says. He stops, he says, you know what? Let's just put the ark over here at this guy's house, Obed-Edom. We're going to park it here, get it out. How would you like to be Obed at this time? You're bringing that thing where? You're bringing it to my house? Kids, don't touch the box. Nobody touch the box. Has anyone seen the cat? Where's the cat? Something amazing happens. God blesses Obed. He blesses his whole household because the ark is there. David gets the message. Here's the message. God wants us to be near to him, but it has to be on his terms. So David says, well, this time we're going to do it the right way. We're going to do it God's way. And the Levites then carried the ark instead of putting it on a cart. We're shocked by what happened to Uzzah. It doesn't set well with us. It's not supposed to. But there's something else that should shock us. See, the question isn't, why did God strike Uzzah down? The question is, why hasn't God struck me down? That's what we're really afraid of. We see him and we say, wait a minute. If Uzzah gets killed for trying to save the ark, something as simple as that seems like a good thing. What about me? I'll never make it. I've done far worse than that. What we're all looking for here is God's mercy. Where is God's mercy? The reason you and I haven't been struck down is because of God's mercy. That mercy came to us on a cross. We're not struck down because Jesus was struck down in our place. We should have been struck down a long time ago. But Jesus stood in our place, and God struck him down. So many people have lost that. What happens when you lose that? What happens when you never really understand that? Worship is lifeless. It's dry. There's no gratitude. It's not that big of a deal. We're more likely to think, well, I'm just going to complain about the way my life is. God, why don't I have a better life? We're more likely to say, why isn't my life better? We're more likely to toss worship to the side and live for God whenever it's convenient. I think this works for me. I like to do things my way. That's what happens when you don't fully realize what Jesus did. There's little passion, hardly any commitment, no reason for getting up in the morning, because being in the presence of God just doesn't mean a whole lot. But do you know, every time you get up in the morning, you can be in the presence of God. That's amazing. That's beautiful. That's incredible. That's something that should overwhelm us in a sense. I can be in the presence of God. So easily lost in our busyness and our priorities that are all wrong, and our distractions and our way of doing things. The real shock is when God's people don't take him seriously. How could that be? How could God's people not take God seriously? Seems all wrong. The Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, was the centerpiece of what is called the Holy of Holies. If you've never heard of that, that was the deepest part of what the temple is. But before the temple, during David's time, it was a tabernacle. It was like a tent, very large. In that Holy of Holies, it was a room, it was the deepest part of the tabernacle. It was a perfectly cubed room. Height, width, length, all the same. Inside that tabernacle, you and I would not be able to enter it. We weren't allowed. You had to be born into the right family line. You had to be born into the priesthood. And even then, even if you were a priest, you could only go in once a year. And that was after you fulfilled all the requirements and did every single thing perfectly. You fulfilled the law, the legal requirements of God. It was an incredible, but really dangerous place. Incredible to be in the presence of God in the deepest part of the tabernacle where the ark of the covenant stood. Incredible, but dangerous. And yet, you and I were meant to be in the presence of God. How is that? How could we be meant to be in such an incredible but dangerous place? We were meant to be with God. Let me show you. This is the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14. Gospel of John. John writes, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We have seen his glory. Glory as of the Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." That word dwelt there. In the original language, you know what it means? It means tabernacled. Tabernacled. And the word glory there, that means God's radiant presence, or we might say God's divine presence. Think about during David's time, the ark symbolized God's presence in the tabernacle. What John is saying is Jesus is God, the divine presence, tabernacled in a human body. He's like a walking, moving tabernacle. God himself. How do you wrap God up in a human body? Jesus, God tabernacled in a human body. So what do you do? What do you do when you're in the presence of God? When you're that close to something that could destroy you in a second? It's actually going to be the subject of next Sunday, part 2. I couldn't fit it all in today because it's so much. I will say it does get a little crazy, so you'll watch for it, but we'll get into it. Today, I want us to reflect on 3 things, though. I've already said them all, but let me put it like this. Number 1, we are meant to be in God's presence. We're meant to be. We can't survive without him. Number 2, we've got a problem because God is holy and we are not. He's righteous. We are impure. We can't come near him. We have to come near him on his terms, but we can't do it. We're going to fail. So number 3, we need God's mercy. We need a way to get back to him. And the only way is for him to provide that way. Jesus is that way. Jesus is the solution to our problem. Alina, if you'll come up. Here's one thing that we should all realize. God is life. We cannot exist without God. Without God, we're just headed toward death. We're keeping it going. We're pretending that we have a life. But if you talk to people who are trying to live forever, especially materialists and the whole transhumanism movement, they're trying to figure out a way how to live forever. Why? Because if there is no life after this life, you'd better keep this one going as long as you can. You've got no hope. God is life. Our life is in him. He sustains the universe. He sustains us. We are immortal beings. We will live forever. But God is the one who sustains us. If you'd like to know exactly how to live in the presence of God forever, then I'd like to help you do that. I'd like to help you see how you can. In fact, all of us would, many of us would. That's what this church is all about. And this church is a people. It's not a place. It's not a thing. It's a people. People who are gathered together, who are bound together by the love of God, who love Jesus more than anything, put him as the centerpiece of their lives, and then love each other. Why? Because God loves us. And if God loves us, then we have the grace and the power to love others, love each other. That's what Navigate is all about. We'd like to show you how you can live in the presence of God if you don't already know? Are you aware of God's presence? Maybe you know. You say, yes, I've committed to following Jesus. I've given him my life. I want to make him the center. He's not been the true center of my life. Maybe you want to do that. You don't have to hide. You can accept his forgiveness. You can come into God's presence and you can worship him. So I'd ask everybody to ask God this question. Make it a prayer. Make it a prayer right now. Ask him this. Say, God, would you reshape my mind? Help me to think differently. Help me to think your way, not my way. We're being shaped by all kinds of things. You may not even realize it, but the culture around us is constantly shaping us. And think about how much time we spend in the culture compared to how much time we spend allowing God to shape us. We're all being shaped by social media, shaped by music, movies, entertainment, politics, other people, our friends, institutions even. Paul says powers and authorities are trying to shape us and influence us. What if you let God influence you? What if you let God shape you? Have God thoughts. Ask him right now. He loves this prayer. It's a good prayer. God, would you reshape my mind? Ask him to reshape you to worship him his way. Would you close your eyes just for a moment? And there's nothing mystical or magical about this. It's just a way to help us focus, eliminate the distractions, and just ask him right now, God, reshape my mind. Help me to think the way you want me to think. I want to be in your presence, God. I want to know you better. I want to be near you. If you feel like you've got to keep him at arm's length, just ask him for forgiveness. Say, God, forgive me. I've been living my own way. I want to live your way. And he'll forgive you. He'll forgive you right now. No hoops to jump through. No backflips you got to do. You just say, God, forgive me. Accept me. I want to live in your presence. I want to know you. I want you to lead me. I want you to speak to me.